Welcome to this presentation of App Studio. My name is François Gast. I'm going to walk you through the build out of your first application with App Studio. So first step, we're going to just click on sign in, and we are integrated with our SSO, so I'm going to be able to just jump right in. This is a landing page. That's where admins would find a lot of the resources. Builders, if you have less privileges, might land on something a little bit different, but still useful for just pure app building activities. So today our plan is to start tracking pets that are allowed in our facility and owners that own those pets as well. So I want to just create an app where pet owners can register their pets, and then there's like an approval process that allows admins to approve or deny pets that are being submitted. So very simple. As we go through this, I'm going to show you some of the features of App Studio, and hopefully you get to learn a thing or two, and you can build that alongside with me as I go through that experience. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is click on Create App and call it Pet Approval App. Now I could get started with Amazon Q, but that's almost cheating, because if I do that, I'm gonna end up with an app essentially. And the exercise today is kind of like showing you how those applications are actually built and made of. So we're gonna go and select the build manually option, and I'm gonna click on next. And then here I have a couple options. If I already had data, I would be able to invoke that data from a connector, and then the application would start with data model already in place. But I want to show you actually how those are put together. So I'm gonna click on skip, and we're gonna get just right in, start building from really a blank canvas. At that point, I won't have anything in my application, but that's usually a good way to start learning about how we build apps in App Studio. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. Some builders are very visual, and they like setting up all their screens first, and they're usually just gonna prototype the look and feel to get a good sense of how they want their apps to behave. I'm in the camp of starting from data. So usually what I do is I'm trying to define the things I'm trying to track, and once I'm done defining that, a lot of the configuration that we see downstream is going to be a lot easier. And I'll show you what I mean by this. We have some components, and here we're landing on the pages, which are essentially the UI builder, the UI layer of your application. So on the left, you will see headers and navigation that's going to control, pages we expose. You see page one here, and I can add multiple pages as needed. And in order to navigate from one page to another, I'm going to use automations, front-end, sometimes back-end automations to really bring my application to life and do things like either make some things happen on the front end or invoke some services in the back end, maybe insert some records in my database, invoke some service like SES to notify someone. So that's going to be more in the automation center, where we're going to start building a lot of this. And then finally, the data center is really where you set up the data model of your application. That's where you kind of tracking all the assets that you want to expose in your application. So think of it as really just the tables of your database that we represent here. The reason why we do this abstraction is because all your automations and pages and components are going to get hooked on that data model. So if you ever wanted to switch from one database to another, instead of having to update hundreds of references in your app, you could simply point the table in your data model to a different table in a different database. So it can be very useful. Something that can take hours, if not weeks of work at time, can be solved here in minutes. Now here I have a couple of choices. I'm not going to go through all of them, but today I want to show you how we can use the built-in database that's in the customer account that we can where we can store data. And essentially App Studio is going to manage the schema of that table that we're going to create via this entity. So I'm going to click on that option, Create App Studio Managed Entity, and this will store our data into DynamoDB. And right there, I'm going to start tracking information about our pet. So I'm going to go ahead and enter some information. So entity name is going to be pets. Primary key is going to be our pet ID. And this is going to be a string that we will generate a UUID for in our configuration. And then primary key data type. So I'm gonna use string so we can generate that ID easily. I'm gonna go ahead and create this entity, and I'm gonna add some fields. So pets are gonna have a pet name. They're gonna have well, before we even get there, they're gonna have a pet type, and they're gonna have a pet owner, and eventually we will have actually a pet owner is going to be probably the login of the we'll see how we want to fetch that information and what we want to store there. But next is going to be the approval status, right? We want to make sure that our pets goes through at least some supervision in terms of who's allowed in and out, and then we'll have an approval date set up here, and I'm gonna set the data type to date. All right, so we have our very basic data model. I could add more entities if I wanted to track more than just the pet, but in our case here, we're gonna start with something very simple. Now at the top, you'll notice that we were in the configuration tab. We have other tabs here that are related to that pet entity. And if I click on data action, you will see here that we can generate data actions automatically. Data actions are essentially commands that lets you interact with data in a simplified way. So you can define, what would be the required input for creating a new pet or getting all pets. We can generate those query, if you will, very simply. So some are here by default, but you can add to the list here as needed. Now, and I'll show you an example of that. Now, sample data is where you actually store sample data about your application, what you're trying to track. So the idea here is that we don't want you to mess with data that you might have in your database. So we have that built-in storage where you can test the configuration of your app as needed. And that's a place you can go back to. You can regenerate data. It's very low risk. So once you've generated your data, you'll see that as we preview our application, we can see that data. Now, when you publish your application, that data goes away. It's not shipping with the app. This is just purely to test drive your configuration. Connection, we don't have to worry about this now. It's essentially going to store data in that database that App Studio is managing in the customer account. But if I wanted to, if at some point I was like, you know what, I want to set that up in a different database, like Aura Postgres maybe, I would be able to disconnect my entity and then wire it to a new entity, wire it to a different database using a connector. I'm not gonna do that today. I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. Now that I have set up my data, I'm gonna go to my page and I'm gonna start building my app. And here, very simple. I'm gonna start with the first page, and this page is gonna be used to submit a new pet. So that's gonna be where I'm gonna drag and drop a form, and I'm gonna start renaming this form new pet form, and the description will be updated with enter your pet info below. All right, so I'm clicking on generate form, and here I could just drag in all the different fields I want and then do all the wiring. But if I already have an entity that tells me what data points I'm tracking, I can just select that. In this case, I want to expose the ID because I'm going to generate the UID there, but it won't be required. It's actually going to be read-only. Pet name, the label looks fine, and that's going to be text input. Pet type, I'm actually going to set up a single select dropdown for this because I don't want people to bring snakes or like crazy stuff. So I want to make sure that we have a list of pet type that has been kind of approved. So that's pretty much what we're gonna do. I'm gonna have a single select drop down to pick that option. And pet owner, text input, yes. I won't actually require the an input there because we're just gonna capture automatically the information about the pet owner. And then approval status, those won't be in for the submission form because that's gonna be later on in the process. As I create my form, you'll see this submit button is gonna get generated as well. It's actually gonna come pre-wired with an automation to insert a record behind the scene. So you see my form here has been generated, and I'm gonna start configuring this, right? I'm gonna select the ID here, and I'm gonna type in for the value. I'm gonna open 2 curly brackets, and this is how we invoke JavaScript expressions. We have a couple of libraries, open source libraries that have been added to App Studio. So I'm gonna leverage one that helps us generate UUIDs, if I can spell this correctly. And this simple expression here, it will just generate a unique ID for me going forward every time I open this form. Pet name, I don't have a value, but as a placeholder, I can have my dog's name as an example of input. Pet type, so this is where I can start configuring. There are ways to actually invoke dynamically a list of pet types if I wanted to manage that in a database. But here I can just statically set this as dog, cat, and parrot. If I want to add more than this, I can do so here. So here I'm gonna add a hamster. All right, so I got a couple of types here, and as for the pet owner, I'm gonna use some JavaScript expression to fetch the name, the first name, last name, and the login of the owner. So in this case, I'm gonna open the curly brackets, and I'm gonna start typing current, and you see our JavaScript editor prompt me immediately with some input here. So current user, I can select this dot first name. And then I'm gonna hit plus, I'm gonna add a space. Last name is going to be current user dot last name. And then I'm gonna add another space and some parentheses. Plus current user ID and there we go. So this should generate an expression where I have first name, last name, and the current user. Hold on. Add a space here. All right, we should be all good now. Perfect. So let's give this a test drive, right? I have this preview button here, top right corner. I'm going to click on it, and this will essentially generate my application the same way it would if I was to actually publish my application. So what we should see here is really how this app is gonna look like. And I can see already there are a couple of things I don't like page 1, I wanna change a new pet form that works. I can see there's a UUID here, but I could append to this, which is a little risky. And then here, the preview mode doesn't actually access my actual identity. So it's placing some placeholder values, but the expression worked. I got first name, preview last name, and then preview user ID. So that's good enough for me. Pet type dropdown is working. This seems to be working fine. Now, if I was to type Benny, enter all the characteristic here and click on submit, it would in theory create an entry. Now, I can't really see that right now, so I'm gonna add a new page, and I want in that page to see all pets. And I'm gonna drag and drop a table here, and here I'm gonna use that data action called getAll to get all the pets that were submitted in the system. And here I can just click on generate, and we have all the pets. So now I do want to automatically go to that page once I submit the form. So if I select my submit button in my first page, you'll see that if I click on it and expose the properties on the right, I see that automation here that is being invoked to create the record, but I want to change that with navigate and take our end users to page 2. Now, talking about the page, I'm going to click on header and navigations, and I'm going to rename those. So that's my new pet form, and page 2 is going to be my all pets. All right, so that's better. Now next, I want to make this a little bit more appealing, so I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to number one, change this to be less wide because we got that big form here, but we have few data. And then I'm going to select the page here. I'm going to click on the background, and I'm going to center all of this. So this is going to look a little better. And I see here I have like style and logo, logo and banners. I'm going to activate those both. And I'm going to use a URL. And I got some short links here. I uploaded our team logo here, and I'm gonna use that to enter the image that we have. And then for the banner, I have also a URL I can use that goes to a generic picture. The first one is actually pointing at an S3 bucket where I store that image. The second one is pointing just at a public library. So let's go check out what that app now looks like. And one point well, let's see. There we go. That is much nicer. All right, so I can see on the left that I now have my page, so I can click on this, and we can see all the pets that were initially created, and then the new entries that I have in my system from just activity that I had previously when I tested my app. All pet looks a little skinny here, so I'm just gonna update the styling. I'm gonna select that component and update the styling to heading medium. Yeah, things start to come together nicely. So next, I want to show you a little bit about automations. So right now, if I go back to my first page, we talked about that submit button, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you how that automation works. If I select this automation, the main difference you'll find between this and the navigate option is that this automation here is actually a backend automation. So clicking on it is exposing parameters, which are essentially just like an API parameter, or it's just the input that's required to execute the automation. Now, this automation has those 4 inputs, ID, pet name, pet type, and pet owner. And essentially, when we created the form, our wizard took care of that and wired everything together. But what it's doing basically, it's just saying like, here are the 4 input that I need, 1 is required, and then you need to tell us where the data is coming from. I could just hardcode a value here and have a set value, but in this case, we're passing variables. We're pointing at those, like that UI.id1.value is actually pointing at that field here called ID1. And it's making sure that the data that's passed is coming from those fields. Now, if I was to click on that little shortcut here, it would take us to the automation center that was empty previously. And it now has this automation that was created for a form to create a record. And it's very simply configured. It's kind of like point and click, you select this and it would expose which entity the records are being written into. And then in the field mapping section, it will show you the ID, the pet name, pet type. If I hover, we'll get more information about this. The only thing that's currently not mapped is the approval status and the approval date, but we don't have those yet, so it's perfectly fine. So that's about it. Like we very simply built a very basic application. And if I wanted to go ahead and publish this application, all I would need to do here is go into this publish center and click on pipeline or click directly on publish. When you click on publish, it just it start publishing your current configuration into that testing environment. So I'm gonna click on publish, just call this v1 and click on publish. Now, while the publishing is in process, I can go back to my app and keep doing additional changes as needed. The idea here is that in my testing environment, I will be able to bring maybe some users and see how that application actually, if they like it, if I get some feedback, and then if everything checks out, I can promote that testing build into a production build, and then that's what I'm going to share with my end users. Now, sharing, publishing is not actually sharing. Publishing is just making your application available. If I wanted to share that application, I would be going into that share. I would click on that share button, and I would here be able to then invite particular users. Now, you might be looking at this from the lens of like where this is builder access. I want to provide access to a user. As you publish your application in more environments, you will see additional tabs for each environment showing up here. So we're publishing right now, so it's not yet available, but we'll get back into this in a moment, and I'll show you what this looks like. Now, on to the approval process. How would I set up the approval process? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I want to create a page for my admins that is going to be restricted to only them. So here in page 3, I'm going to have a table, and this table is not going to show all the pets. I want this table to actually show only pets where the status is set to pending approval. So I don't have that yet. So I'm going to create a new data action. And that data action, let's see, pet name, pet type, pet owner, approval status, and approval date. I can generate that table. And then I'm going to modify that data action. It's by default called getAll1 right now because there's no constraint set on it. But I'm going to rename this pets pending approval. And this here is going to let me add a condition where pet approval status is equal to pending approval. I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna update my automation. So when you create a new pet, the default status is pending approval, because right now I haven't entered anything. So let's do that next. And let's click on that action in the automation center for the approval status and pending approval. All right, so back to my page 3. Now I know that all the data that I have here will be constrained to only the pets that are pending approval. And if I look at my preview, I probably don't have any pets in there right now that meet that criteria. So I just want to verify that this is indeed the behavior that we are expecting. And then I can start adding additional constraints. So page 3, there is no data. Now, since I added some logic in my automation, if I was to submit a new pet, like I had a cat when I was a kid called Noiret, so we're just gonna click on submit, and this should take us to this pet that's now pending approval, and I can see now I have a record here showing pending approval. I want to add a quick action here where I can set I can approve that pet on the fly. So let's get back in there. I'm gonna select my table, and here I'm gonna add an action, and that action, so the action header is gonna call actions, and this pet here is gonna be called this action here is gonna be called approve. And when I approve a pet, I'm gonna click on add action to essentially define what I want to see happening. The first one is going to be I have to update the record that we have in the database. So that's gonna be a backend automation that I'm gonna use invoke automations for. And once I make that update, I'm gonna want to refresh the table so I can see the latest data and I can see the updated value in the table. So I'm gonna select that table and I'm gonna select action, refresh data source. And then going back to my previous, to the previous panel, I can now start configuring that invoke automation one here. So I currently don't have any parameter, but I can guess already what's going to be needed. Essentially, to update the record that I'm clicking on, I'm going to have to pass the unique identifier for that record. So that's easy. That's that current.row ID here. So I know I can start creating my automation here, and I'm going to add a parameter to say I want the value of that parameter to be equal to the current row dot ID, and the name of that parameter is going to be pet ID, and the type is going to be string, and it's going to be a required input. So hopping into my automation, I can now create an update record action and select my pet entity, and then the condition is going to be update any pet where the ID is equal to the value passed by our parameter, which is called params.petID. And that's how I'm going to invoke that that single record. Once I have that record, I want to update two things. I want to update the approval status and the approval date. So once I have those, I'm going to use the syntax. I'm going to use actually a string approved here, and approval date is going to be a JavaScript a JavaScript expression that's going to give me today's date. There you go. I did a typo here. Okay, so let's test drive this, and then we're gonna handle how do we restrict some people, non-approvers from seeing that last page. So I'm gonna go ahead back to our preview, and here I have that page 3, and I can see that Noiret here is pending approval, and if I click on approve, everything going well, Noiret should go away. There we go, and on all pets, we can see that she's been approved on today's date. All right, so next I want to make sure that submitters can't approve their own work, right? So I'm going to have to introduce app roles in my application. How do I do that? I'm going to go back to my page here. Once I'm on that page, I can click on the background, go to the properties of the page, and here we have in the visibility section, open to all end users. So I'm going to uncheck this because I don't want this page to be visible to non-approvers. And this is where I'm going to start being able to create roles. So we have different type of roles. I can have custom rules if I wanted to, but in this case, I'm just gonna start creating roles by clicking on that Manage Roles button. And I'm gonna have two roles. The first one is Submitter. And the second one is Approver. And so I could control for each page, who can see what, but in this instance here, I can now go back to my page and say this page here is only available to approvers. All right, so our app is in good shape, and I'm actually gonna make like one last change. I'm gonna show you how, if I was a user and maybe I wanted to get on that page, see a list of existing pets that I have. So I don't know, maybe I'm a little tired, overworked, and I forgot, did I submit my approval or not? I want to have a table right here at the bottom that shows all the pet submission I've already submitted. So I'm gonna add a table, and here I'm gonna click on Generate Table, and I'm gonna create a new data action called My Pet. So I'm gonna navigate to the data action. And in this query, I'm gonna show all the pets that I submitted. So I'm gonna add a rule to say I want the pet owner to be equal to, and here I guess I can just reuse the expression I used when I was setting up the value in my form, like this expression here. So I should be able to map this constraint here. All right, so let's give that a try. Let's see if I'm gonna add just a quick. So I probably don't need to search for all pets. It's not like someone's gonna have 100 pets that they want to submit, and I can just add a text component here to say my pet submissions. Now, if I wanted to also show, let's select this here. Can add an S. The last thing I want to do here is I'm going to hide some of the things I don't really need to see, like the ID. I'm not too worried about it. And then pet owner, obviously it's going to be me, so I don't need to see that, but I might want to see the approval status and the approval date. All right, so I think this looks pretty good. I might be ready to publish this application again. So I'm just gonna go ahead and click on publish, and we're gonna start publishing this with our end users. In the meantime, I can go on and check out if this works, and I can see here I have the previous submission I had. Got my pet submissions here. I can add more pets. I can see that I no longer see the other page that I gated behind that admin role. So everything looks like it's working as expected. So I'm publishing now, and once my application is ready, I can promote it to production. Well, thank you for watching. Hopefully you can tag along and build your own app as well. Yeah, feel free to share some comments and other walkthrough you'd like to see with App Studio. Thank you.